Welcome to Grit. Today we talk about grace that trains it, and it being the engine of mentorship. Here I go again. A dad using his children as an example. One day my son came and asked, "Dad, why can't I have a cell phone? All my friends have one." This is a question that makes me slow down. Why do I have different expectations for my children than others? Am I being prideful? Or not having grace for my children? Am I being legalistic and not allowing them to experience the grace that can come when they make a mistake? Should I be thinking instead that if I or my children do something wrong, that God will forgive us anyways? Come on, Dad, let your child be like everybody else. This is the difficulty, isn't it? We think that we should consider and think the way that others think and do the things that others do, and our kids think the same way, and it's a constant challenge. Why, Dad? Why can't I just have a phone like everybody else? Many times we come to this question and we want to give a different answer. I know I want to. I want to be able to tell them, yeah, you can have a cell phone. Many times we have given, many times we just give another answer. Many of us let our children do things like play Fortnite. I have. Some of us have engaged in discussions about K-pop Demon Hunter, and sometimes we have these questions for our own lives and not just for others. We consider, should I watch this? Everybody else is watching this. Should I act in this way? Everybody else is. Should I only come to church on Sunday morning because I can spend more time on my work? Should I go to the bar because all the other Christians are doing it? Should we allow same-sex people to live the life they choose because we don't want to seem like we're not living with grace? This tension hits us when we are sitting at our job and we have a choice to pad the numbers so that we might get the promotion. This tension hits us and we think everybody else is doing what the Bible, just think about this. We're in the car and we're driving along and you have the choice. Do you go as fast as everybody else is? Do you break the same laws that everybody else does? The Bible doesn't apply when I'm driving, does it? This is the tension. I mean, come on, you can't be serious. Everybody speeds. These are the thoughts that we have. Well, we all want to grow spiritually. But too often, we treat grace like a safety net instead of a training ground. We want strength, but resist the process. We want grit, but avoid the discipleship that grace demands. So how does one answer this question? How does God answer the question? Well, Titus gives us the answer. Titus 2:11 through 12. It says, "For the grace of God has appeared that offers salvation to all people. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age." Paul says grace trains us. Not just saves us, it trains us. Hold on and let me say that again. Paul says grace trains us, not just saves us. Grit is formed by grace that teaches us to say no to sin and yes to godliness. We have a choice. We can do and live the way that everybody else does, or we can live the way of grace. Paul teaches and works through this. He says renouncing worldly passions is part of grit. Yarbrough, in his work on Titus, says that the first word "for" is significant. It establishes the answer for why a person should live like this. Paul grounds his counsel to Titus in the manifestation of God's grace. He shows that it's because of grace that we live this way. It's because of grace that we don't give in, that we say no. For grace gives us the power. For grace leads us the direction that we're supposed to go. For grace, we do what God has asked us to do. Discipleship isn't about behavior modification. It's grace-driven transformation. Mentors must model grace as power, not as permission. You see, when we say, God will forgive me, I'm speeding, but God will forgive me. Or I say, I'll just pad the numbers this time, God will forgive me. Or I yelled at my wife again, but God will forgive me. Or my kids want to do and have the things that other kids do. And so I need to let them make mistakes and live in worldly ways, because God will forgive them. God does forgives them, but there's a difference. By saying no, Titus is acting differently than false teachers who deny God by their actions. This is according to Kossenberger in his work on Titus. We have a choice. We can live like everybody else. We can go the same path of false teachers where we say one thing and do another. We can live differently. Paul repeats this theme for young men. He says that it points back to the instructions given earlier to young men, to how we're supposed to live an example. This is pointing back to that. Grit means saying no to self and yes to Christ. No to self and yes to Christ in everything that we do. This only happens in light of the grace of Christ. Paul teaches in Titus that virtue is developed not from self-effort, but in light of divine grace. What does that mean? That means that because we live from grace of what Christ did on the cross, because he's given the grace of the Holy Spirit, because he's given us the grace, he's given us the power, he's empowered us to live differently. We don't live under condemnation, we don't live under fear, we don't live the same way that everybody else lives. We live differently because we live from grace. Grace trains grit. Mentorship must be rooted in grace. Paul encourages self-denial in order that a person follows the example of Jesus. Mark 8:34 says, "Then he called the crowd to him, along with his disciples, and said, 'Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me.'" Grace doesn't excuse weakness. It trains strength. Grace doesn't excuse weakness. It trains strength. Mentorship must be grace-driven. Young men need to see that grit isn't about trying harder. It's about being trained by grace. They need to see us renounce sin and embrace godliness with joy and not shame. When we live outside of grace, when we live in a way where we say, "Oh, it's okay, I'm going to live that way, I'm going to do that thing," then we have shame, and we live from shame. But we live from the grace, knowing that we have victory over the things. We live with joy, knowing that God has strengthened us and given us the power to say no. But we have to say no. In light of what Paul wrote, we have a choice to make. We can take grace and abuse it, or we can take grace and allow it to help us engage in the fight laid out before us. Grace is God's activity on behalf of humans, which we could never earn. This thought should never drive us to live worldly lives, but lives separated due to the grace appeared, according to Lee and Griffin's work on Titus. According to 2 Corinthians 1:12, it says, "Now this is our boast. Our conscience testifies that we have conducted ourselves in the world, and especially in our relationships with you, with integrity and godly sincerity. We have done so, relying not on worldly wisdom, but on God's grace. It enables us to live godly lives." Grace doesn't excuse weakness. It trains strength. Where do you need grace to train you? This week, ask God to strengthen one area: self-control, godliness, uprightness. Then mentor someone through the same grace. Grit grows when grace leads. Grace is lived out in our lives, and it provides the testimony for what we are speaking. Grace carries out the sanctification process that you are continuing to process through. In this present age, we are to live out the grace that has been given us. You are not to abuse the grace that was given you. Practice grace through the empowerment of the Holy Spirit as evidenced by the life of Christ this week. Christ did not die so that we could live apart from grace. He died so that we can live through it. Grace doesn't excuse weakness, it trains it.